What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Nakusoo here, and welcome back to the second week of Gamejolt games. Once again, I have 3 more indie games that I would love to share with you today. Let's do this. Alright, so we're going to be starting with my number 3 pick. This is Hade, a demo currently being developed by Curran, and this was released in September of 2016, so really recently this game was in development, and it is still in development and currently greenlit on Steam, which is really awesome. So congrats, Curran, for actually getting your puzzle game released onto Steam. So that is going to be really interesting to see how the game develops out in the future. This takes a simple minimalistic puzzle style, and I wasn't really sure if I would like this concept at first because I'm not that great at puzzles. I think I'm alright, but in terms of being stuck, that is kind of what happened a lot in this game. It didn't really get hard until around puzzle 11, then it got progressively harder. And the reason for that is it adds different obstacles that you have to go over. So for instance, you start out with basic arrows that you have to guide this gear across around this grid. Later on, it adds these paddles that you have to reflect the gears off of, and depending on the rotation, it'll go in a certain direction. And then it even gets crazier later on, where you have these arrows or X's or any other of the objects that you've been using have this red substance around it, which acts as a way to double back and forth. So sometimes puzzles are timed, and in order to stall the time, you have to get really creative. And it was something I was really interested in. One of the huge reasons I didn't really get turned off from playing a puzzle game like I usually do, even though I'm not that great, is because it combines some really nice calming ambient music with some really nice gameplay, and I really like the art style that was used in this. Again, really simple, but it gets the job done. In the demo, there are 25 levels that I played. I got to all 25. I think it took me like around 2.5 hours to get to 25. Some puzzles I got stuck on were like 20 minutes. One I got stuck on for like 30 minutes. So that was really crazy, but coming back to it later helped me a lot in actually solving it with a clearer mind. So definitely this is a really fun, short, and sweet puzzle game, at least for the demo. Currently, Curran has around 140 levels so far, that I'm not entirely sure in the end how many levels there will be in this game. But if you want to check it out, there will be a link in the description. As always, I definitely think if you like puzzle games, especially a different type of puzzle games, or maybe if you're like me where you're not that great but want to take a shot at it anyway, you might enjoy Hade. Next up for our number 2 spot is going to be Mythical Graveyard Uprising. This game was submitted by Inc., made for the Indies vs Gamers, and this was released last year. It had a big update last year as well, which added other enemy types. And my experience with this game so far is that it's really addicting. I found out that at the start I was like looking at the screenshots, just wondering, alright, so it looks like you just have a basic kind of game where you just fight enemies, you have different weapons, but I didn't know that it actually used RNG based weapons and other elements for the power-ups when you level up. That is what really made the game for me. And a lot of games, especially a lot of roguelike or roguelite type of games where they have these random power-ups and other random weapons that you find to help you on your way, it definitely gives you a unlimited feel of what you can possibly do in the game, building towards different types of enemies that you have trouble with. For instance, I had a lot of trouble taking out the Minotaurs and the Cyclopses, so I took the power-ups that increased my damage towards fighting those specific types of enemies. Also, having the high score on the leaderboard is something else that I work towards because I am a little bit competitive when it comes to playing games. I like to see how high I can get my score, and I did manage to get number 8 on the leaderboard, which was really cool. It took me about 3 hours. I definitely would say on this list, this game is the one that I played the most, and it definitely gave me a lot of fun times playing as a unknown demon hunter, which totally isn't Van Helsing. The controls were really tight as well, as I tried to play with the keyboard and mouse, and then I also had a hand at playing with the controller. Either worked fine for me, but personally I feel that the mouse was a bit better in having precision in terms of actually killing the enemies. It just gave me that slight edge and I was more comfortable with it. But definitely, if you want to use a controller to play this game, it is very possible, and it is all down to personal preference. There were a host of a lot of different enemy types. These enemies like snipers that would shoot you from across the map. They had these other cyclopses that would just shoot a giant beam at you, which was freaking crazy. And there were also minotaurs that would charge at you, which is probably the most annoying enemy because sometimes you can't really see them. They're like off screen and they come very fast. They might knock you into other enemies, causing you to take unnecessary damage. Another thing is the gold that is in the game is only used for score right now, but the developers want to have gold be something else in the future. So maybe it could be a shop, or I'm not entirely sure, maybe using gold towards powering up or maybe restoring your health or something. It's going to be really interesting to see what the developers actually choose for this game in the future as it progresses. I definitely had a lot of fun playing this game, and if you like a game where you just go into different types of graveyards to see how far you can get and have a high score, definitely check out Mythical Graveyard Uprising, as it was one of the funnest experiences so far that I have played on Gamejolt. Before we move on, I wanted to give a quick warning because this game does have a tendency to have a lot of flashing and glitching out. So if you're prone to having seizures, then I really recommend not looking at this footage, as I don't want anyone to get hurt by looking at footage or anything like that. So definitely, if you just want to listen to the audio, feel free, or if you just want to go on about your day, then feel free to as well. But I really hope you enjoyed up to this video so far. For everyone else, let's move on to the final game. Prototype is a game submitted by Uncaught Exceptions. This was released in 2014, and definitely what made this game number 1 for me is a combination of a couple things. The art style, which has a really anti-chamber feel. If you ever seen or played that game, they share some similarities in that regard. But the thing that really got me to play and be really immersed in this game is the observation and the perspective levels. You control a character, unknown and first person, and as you go through this, what's to be like a program or some kind of game being developed, as you find different texts all over the game, and they really did a really awesome job being able to include the story, but in a different way, not by narration, but by having text that you have to find, be it by falling off and looking up, or going to certain areas and turning around and just seeing that text in front of you, which kind of gives you somewhat of an unsettling feeling. But it was really awesome at the same time to see these little bits and pieces of the story as it progressed to the end of the game. One of the issues I would say with the game is it's pretty easy, being that I only spent like 5 minutes in total stuck on one area, and that area is something that when you complete it you feel really good about. I wish they incorporated more puzzles into the game, because there's like only a couple per area and there's like 4 areas that you go into, so it can beat the game within 30 to 35, maybe even 40 minutes your first time around, especially if you just want to look at the story elements. So that is something they could add in the future, which they are looking to possibly do come back in the future, and they know that there are some things that can be added onto the game. Another thing that was really interesting was when I was reading on the Gamejolt page, this was a student project that they worked on, which was really interesting to actually be a part of, seeing how a game was kind of developed. Though this game that was released to the public was a more polished version of the student project that they worked on, but the concept is still the same. The music with the game added a bit of a weirdness. It was a little bizarre hearing some sounds, some unsettling music that made you feel like you were being watched. At the same time, it was calming. To get a better picture of the whole game in general, this is something you would have to experience for yourself, as it's one of those games that has a lot of atmospheric involvement, and when you play it and find out new things, find out some things that makes your mind go a little weird when it kind of changes up the environment when you find something new, and how it actually progresses towards the end. And it was just something that, despite the other two games being really good as well, something that really caught me in this game is just being really interested in the environment, the whole setting in general. If you're definitely a fan of having your mind kind of messed with a bit, while also having puzzles where it's not too hard, in the end you can find some hidden secrets of the story inside this actual game. Definitely check out this game. It is probably like one of the top favorite games so far that I played on Gamejolt, and it's one that I definitely hope the developers come back to in the future. Here is a question of the day for you. What is the hardest puzzle game that you have ever played? Let me and everyone else know in the comment section below. For myself, it is probably Space Chem, as that game takes like chemical engineering and programming and puts that into a puzzle form, which was like really intimidating for me. And although I did fairly decent at the beginning, it gets really crazy later on. So that is probably the hardest puzzle game that I have played so far. Thanks for sticking around to the end of this video. As always, I will be back next week with 3 more indie games that are badass for you to check out. If the content today did help you in discovering something new, or if you are curious to see what other games I will showcase in the future, then remember to like and smack that Dapper Wolf subscribe icon. Lightly, please. Have a wonderful week, and until next time, keep discovering awesome.